Hello, this is Wayne Roseberry of Software Testing. One of the things that testers do that's very important is coming up with the ideas that we use to test the product. A way that testers frequently do this is by going to the user stories or scenarios that the product team, the business, the developers have created or used to design the product, build the product. And while that information is useful for thinking of testing ideas, you should avoid executing those stories and scenarios as written. It's limiting. It constrains your thinking. It's too easy. Someone's already thought about it. Someone's worked very hard to make that thing work. It's going to be in the demo. Everyone's looking at it. If something goes wrong, you notice it right away. There's all sorts of reasons why focusing a lot of testing attention on that distracts from the much larger, much riskier set of behaviors that you should be digging into as a tester. One of the ways that I like to deal with scenarios and user stories is to transform them, change them into something else. I like to say model the problem, model the story, model the scenario, and then from the model derive the bigger test ideas. And the way this works is you transform it into a different shape, and in that transformation you see something else. Other relationships pop out. The model itself tends to dictate other ways that you can change the inputs, change the conditions, change sequences, and such as that. What we're really doing, well, in one sense, we're creating a tool we're going to use to test or guide our testing. But maybe more importantly, is we are changing ourselves. We're changing our perceptions. We are triggering our imagination. We're causing analysis and thought to happen for us to mentally explore the problem space. Okay, get us in a new way of thinking. Break us out of the narrow paths that the stories dictate or the stories tend to force us down. So in this video, I've got one technique for doing that, which is to take a story and break it into its parts. And from that list of parts, we start to see an expansion emerge as we try to make the parts make sense relative to the story and the context that it's in. All right, let's go ahead. Okay, so we're in Notepad, simple app. This is easy to use. We don't need much to be able to do what we're going to do here. And what I want to talk about is taking a story, a user story we've got for whatever project we're on, and making it into more than it is. Right? Because if we take the story and execute it just as written, it's one case, it's one test, and it's not very rich, it's not very interesting. And want to talk about ways that we can make more interesting tests from it. So in this one, it's as if we've got some library website. I grabbed it from a website that has sample user stories, examples of the format the user story should be in. So I just took that as from one of the examples. And in this, we've got some library website, and the story goes, as a library member, I want to renew books online so I can keep them longer without visiting the library. And if we imagine someone executing that, they would probably load the library app web page, sign in as the user, find the book that they've already got checked out, and click renew, and then see if it got renewed. A very simple 1, 2, 3, 4 set of steps, and really not that interesting, right? Because we could be doing a lot more. We could be looking at things more likely to find problems in the sequence. So how do we make this into something more interesting? And one way to do that is, instead of taking the story as is to break it apart into its constituent parts and see if we can make something more of it, right? So let's read this off again. As a library member, right, that's one part here. I want to renew books online, that's another part, so I can keep them longer without visiting the library. So maybe we can just think of this, just the template of what that is, right? We've got a persona followed by actions and then goals, right? These are the parts of our little story here and the template that would describe those parts. So let's take that apart then. Personas, right? What personas do we know about? Well, one persona is library members, right? Okay. And actions. What actions do we know about? Well, the most obvious action that's in here is want to renew books, right? Renew. And let's leave it at that for a second. Now let's get back to that. I'll just cover the obvious stuff. And let's go goals, right? What are the goals that we know about? Well, keep longer without visiting library. So let's just say keep longer. I'll just say without visit. Okay, there, just to keep it short. Now, that just describes the story that we have, but if we look at this, there's more implied. Let's look at this actions. Renew, but there's more than one action in here. I want to renew books online, right? You're just not magically online. You had to go there. You had to load the website. So let's go visit library's website. And we'll leave it at, actually, let's just say homepage, right? Although now that I think about it, this is visit, let's go, leave off the word visit because I don't want to type too much. Website renewal page. And maybe it's not the renewal page. Maybe it's like, some page where you can take actions. Let's call it the renewal page for now. Okay. Notice how we're starting to come up with more detail of what we're talking about when we do this. And then something I left off of here, maybe it's because of the way I wrote the template, right? Actions act on things, right? Verb, noun. So let's say act on what objects? Because we got an object in there. We've got books, right? I want to renew books online. Okay, so this now starts to make things more interesting, right? Because the story, as written, as library, I want to renew books online and such. This renew books online, because stories tend to be very, high-level goal-oriented without implementation in them. They leave those details out. But for us to really start to take it apart, we have to start describing those parts. You go to the library homepage. You have to visit it's probably not on the homepage where you can renew a book, right? It's probably somewhere else where you can renew a book, right? And so there's some renewal page. And then there's this notion of books, right? We gotta take that apart a bit to say, well, yeah, that's an object that's being acted on, right? But now that we've looked at it, there's another notion here, which is, since we're gonna renew a book so we can keep it longer, right? In order to renew the book, we have to have it in our possession, right? How did that book get in our possession? How are we in a position to renew it, right? So checkout, right? We have to have checked the book out. Notice it's not in the story. The story doesn't talk about checking out, but there's some state that came before renewing for us to be able to do that. So now we realize there's this action of checking out that applies to books. And it's a precursor to renewing, right? Let's think of another thing. If we're going to, I want to renew the book online, right? Well, what's the other option other than do nothing for renewing, right? We might return the book. Okay, so here's another action that kind of naturally follows from the story as written. Let's go on to books.
Okay, we've got books, but can't you check out other things in a magazine? In a what library? Like a magazine. So my brain was going a little Freudian slip there. Okay, magazines, movies on DVD, maybe movies on film. I mean, I'm a kid of the 1970s and 1980s, and you could indeed check out, film movies back then. Maybe music on records, vinyl, yeah. Music on CD, right? Software, games, board games. Let's say board games, right? Video games, right? Video game consoles. I think some libraries let you do that, right? There's actually, for some of these things, some libraries let you, I'm just going to say playback equipment, right? So some libraries might even let you check out a CD player or a record player or something like that. All right, so now we got this larger set of objects that we might be talking about, right? But what about these objects, right? Like, if we're talking about you want to renew so you can keep them longer, what's the implication of having to renew? It means that there might have been a due date. Okay, so now we've got to realize that there's more than just what kind of object is. There's some kind of property attached to the object. So let's just do this. Let's go object dot due date, right? And that's some date value. And then object dot checkout date, right? That is due date plus some offset, right? Or we could just call it a date, but actually there's a relationship between the due date and the checkout date, possibly, right? Yeah, I think there would be. So there's that, right? And since we're doing that now, let's just make that a subproperty. Let's go object dot type of what type of object it is, right? And now we're building up a richer description of the objects, things like that. Okay. But what about these library members? I mean, it's not like there's one library member. They're distinguished from each other, right? So personas, you've got an ID, right? And let's just say it's some some number, okay? But there's first name, some string, right? Personas dot last name, right? How long have you been a member, right? Membership date, and that's some date. Personas, what's their status? Are they current? Is their membership expired? Have they been rejected? Have they done something that says you shouldn't be, checking books out or such as that, right? There's a whole bunch of, you start going off on a list of things that could apply to these objects, right? And likewise, these actions, I'm going to leave this as a list here, right? Oh yeah, actually now we go checked out object dot checked out to, and let's just say let's go persona ID, right? So now we can know who has it checked out, right? There's a relationship now in the data. Let's go object. Let's invent another concept. Okay, an action. You want something, but you haven't checked it out yet. A lot of libraries have this notion of reserve. Okay, object dot reservation list, and that would be like an array of personas ID. Right, people who have a reservation for this book. Right. Now let's go back to our little story, and let's just keep it simple. Let's just say that testing the test ideas, the test cases or whatever, are this same template. Okay, so that's how we started. We said, okay, I'm going to be this persona. I'm going to do this action, which is renew a book, right? And so that I can, for the goal is to keep it longer. Okay, and let's keep that same goal. But now what we're going to do is we combine these values up here, different permutations of it, together to make a test. So again, let's say, let's just say we have a list of persons, right? And so, we've got ID, first, last, status, right? And the ID is, 1, Fred Jones, and status is current, and 2 is Barney Jones, a brother of Fred, and their status is rejected. They've done something wrong, okay? And so now, as persona, as, let's just do it this, persona ID equals 1, who is a current member, I want to, and let's say we want to check out a movie so that I can do whatever. And then let's say as persona.id equals 2, I want to check out a movie, right? You see where this is going? And now let's think of it this way. Persona ID equals 2, and I'm just kind of pulling values from the thing. I want to return a movie, and then and ordinarily I wouldn't really write it out this way. I'm just doing this to kind of describe how the thought process expands to I want to renew a movie. Okay. Now, really, what it is you say for each combination of values, expand the story template. Where let's just call this the story template, right? Expand the story template. For example, so I know what we're talking about. For example, it looks like this, right? Now think about this. We've got a rich set of values here, and it'd be like multiplying all the different combinations to come up with all the cases we get out of this. And, we may or may not want to do all of these, but see how it gets so much more interesting, right? So as persona ID equals 1, which is our Fred Jones, who's our current member, I want to check out a movie. That's just one step away from renewing. It's not that complex. It's a straightforward little scenario, not much interesting. But look at persona 2. They're rejected for some reason. I don't know. Maybe they were returning books that were damaged, and the library has said we can't have you do that anymore. You do that too often, right? And they come back in and they want to check out. That seems like a different case, right? Maybe we want the app to reject the request to check out, or and this may be the librarian app, right? That would say, no, I can't let this person check out. But if this same person has something already checked out, a movie, they want to return it, then perhaps it should allow them. It's just because they've been rejected doesn't mean we don't want what they've already checked out back. But if they've got something checked out, again, if this is this person too has been rejected, our Barney Jones, our slovenly member of the library, who we said you cannot be us anymore, and they want to renew something, we should be saying, no, you've got to bring stuff back, right? Possibly. Maybe that's what it is. The key thing is that by taking the story as it's written, deconstructing it, just in the act of deconstruction, we start to realize it's begging for us to expand it. It's like, well, what other kinds of objects, what other kinds of actions exist in this world? What subproperties of a member or a book or a movie or of an action even do we need to think about in the set of stories or set of cases we want to try? It's just begging for that kind of expansion. And as we're doing this expansion, sometimes we might even say, we didn't think about it in this app that if you're going to do this, you're going to do that, there's some other property or action or thing that really needs to apply here, and we need an answer for it. Maybe it's feedback on the spec. Maybe it's already in the spec. Maybe you've already got a requirement for it. But it feeds a set of cases that in the way that we're doing it here, we're just saying, well, we're just templatizing the story we have, and we're taking this new set of values we've generated, pumping it back into the story. And if you look at this, I think we're talking about the possibility of hundreds of different kinds of possible things to test that all came from redefining the story into its parts, constructing more properties, values, and possibilities for those parts, and then reassembling new stories from that template and coming up with interesting test cases that now take the product into different dimensions than you might have thought of. That's the basic exercise of this kind of analysis. Not too hard to do, and you notice it was cheap. I used Notepad and just a couple of lines to infer a rather huge expansion of the possibilities. And I think if you stretch this far enough, even in a specification state, you would come to questions on the requirements and the design that possibly someone hadn't thought of. And most certainly, when